It started on a Sunday morning, when the sky over Chicago tore open like paper soaked in oil. People thought it was some freak weather event at first. Black clouds folding inwards, a humming that rattled glass, then a silver spear the size of a mountain sliding through the clouds. No sirens, no warnings, just an unspoken understanding that whatever was coming wasn't ours. I was in my apartment, still half drunk from the night before, watching my coffee machine hiss when my phone started lighting up with texts. "You seeing this? Turn on the news." "Holy shit, man. Look outside." I stepped to the window and saw the shadow. Not the ship itself, that was higher, massive, but the shadow it cast across the city. It made everything look like evening in the middle of the morning. Within minutes, the first broadcast cut in. No polished anchors, no calm government spokesperson, just shaky footage from some guy on the street pointing his phone at the sky. The voiceover wasn't official, but the fear was contagious. "They're landing. God help us." They didn't waste time with greetings. No "take me to your leader" crap. No demands in English. Just a pulse. Something deep and gut-punching that vibrated in your bones more than your ears. People dropped to their knees, clutching their skulls. I nearly blacked out. When it stopped, they spoke through the city's power grid, lights flickering, traffic signs blinking with alien symbols that shifted into English. "We have come for labor. Comply and you will be spared destruction." That was their first message. Cold, efficient, no hint of negotiation. They weren't here for peace or alliances. They were here for bodies. Hours. Within an hour, military jets scrambled. They never came back. The ship, no, the fleet, because by then more had arrived, had weapons unlike anything we'd imagined. They didn't fire bullets or beams. They erased matter. The jets just unraveled in the air, dissolving into dust. Panic turned to chaos. Looting broke out almost instantly. People figured if we were about to be taken, they might as well take something first. I grabbed my duffel, stuffed it with canned food, water, a flashlight, and the Glock I'd inherited from my old man. My building was already half empty. I wasn't planning on waiting for them to knock. I thought about my younger brother, Nate. He lived across town, and if I was going to die, I wasn't going to do it without trying to find him. The streets were a war zone. Not against the aliens yet, but between us. Humans turning on humans, as if the end of the world wasn't enough. By nightfall, the first harvest began. Their machines descended like huge black spiders, legs unfolding until they locked into the ground. Then came the light, a cone of shimmering gold that lifted screaming people into the air. They fought, clawed at buildings, held on to cars, but the beam didn't care. It took what it wanted. I hid behind a burned-out bus, watching them work. They didn't look like anything I'd seen in movies. No humanoid faces, no eyes. They were towering insect metal hybrids, all sharp edges and shifting plates, moving with the precision of predators who've done this 1,000 times before. I don't know if they were soldiers or slavers, but I do know this. They didn't see us as people. When one of them passed close, I felt something strange. Not fear, not exactly. Rage, that cold, old kind of rage you get when someone thinks they own you. My father used to say, "A man's got two choices when someone tries to break him: bend or bite back." That night, I decided I wasn't bending. I didn't know it yet, but that choice, made in the dark under a burning sky, would lead to the moment when these invaders, these self-proclaimed masters, would look back on Earth and wish they'd never found it. And the first taste of regret they'd ever know was coming soon. The streets were a graveyard by morning. The air had that metallic tang you taste after a lightning strike, but stronger, like breathing in burnt wiring and blood. The alien harvesters were still combing through the city, their beams sweeping across blocks, pulling up anyone they found like weeds. The hum of their machines was constant, deep enough to vibrate in your ribcage. I'd barely slept. Every few minutes, I'd jolt awake thinking I heard their footsteps, or whatever you'd call the sound their limbs made when they clamped into the asphalt. I'd hold up in the back room of a pawn shop, barricading the front with whatever I could find: motorcycle frames, a vending machine, an old pool table. It wouldn't stop them, but it would slow down humans looking to loot. My first priority was still Nate. He lived across the river in a crappy one-bedroom above a laundromat. Normally it'd be a 20-minute drive, but the city was shredded. Cars flipped over, streets blocked by debris, entire intersections swallowed into craters. I'd have to go on foot. Before leaving, I scavenged the shop, found a half-empty duffel with ammo, 2 combat knives, and, miraculously, a battered Kevlar vest. It wasn't alien-proof, but it'd stop a human bullet. I strapped it on. Outside, the morning light was weak and orange from the smoke. Every shadow looked like it might move. I kept to alleys, slipping between dumpsters, ducking under fire escapes. Every now and then I'd hear the beam activate, followed by muffled screams cut short. Sometimes I'd see the shimmer pass at the end of a street, and I'd freeze until it moved on. I wasn't the only one moving. Other survivors crept through the ruins, men and women carrying backpacks, kids clutching stuffed animals, the occasional guy with a baseball bat or crowbar. No one spoke. Eye contact meant risk. This wasn't a rescue mission. Everyone was out for themselves. 3 blocks in, I heard the first gunfire of the day. I pressed my back to a wall and peeked around the corner. 2 men were arguing in front of a grocery store. One had a shotgun, the other a length of pipe. Their shouting was loud enough to echo down the block. It took me a second to realize they weren't just arguing. They were fighting over a crate of bottled water. The shotgun man didn't wait long. The blast was deafening. The guy with the pipe dropped instantly, his blood spraying across the busted windows. The shooter didn't flinch, just kicked the body aside and dragged the crate into the shadows. That's when I knew the truth. The aliens were the big threat, but people were going to kill each other long before the harvesters got to them. I kept moving. By noon, I'd reached the river. The bridges were a mess. One had collapsed into the water. Another was blocked by a line of alien tripods. These weren't the harvesters. They were leaner, faster looking, their limbs stabbing into the pavement like spears. They scanned everything, their heads, or whatever passed for heads, rotating with eerie precision. There was no way across without being seen. I'd have to find another route. That's when I remembered the service tunnels. Years ago, I'd worked a temp job for the city's maintenance department. There were access hatches every few blocks, most leading to electrical or water systems, some to old maintenance walkways under the river. If I could find one. Luck came in the form of a half-collapsed parking garage. In the far corner, behind a tangle of rebar and concrete, I found the hatch. The lock had been broken, probably by someone who'd gone in before me. I climbed down, pulling the cover back into place above my head. The tunnel was pitch black except for the weak beam of my flashlight. The air was damp, heavy with mildew and stagnant water. I followed the narrow walkway, my footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. At one point, I thought I heard something moving ahead, a scraping, wet sound. But when I stopped, it stopped too. I wasn't sure if it was paranoia or something real. Halfway through, I found the source. A man sat slumped against the wall, a pistol in his lap, his shirt soaked with blood. He was alive. Barely. "They took my family," he whispered. His voice was cracked, dry. "You can't fight them. Don't try." I crouched down, trying to check his wound. It was a deep burn across his side, the flesh charred black. Not a gunshot, not a knife, something else, something alien. They burn you from the inside, he rasped. Not heat, not fire, just gone. His eyes glazed over, and then he was still. I took his pistol and 3 spare magazines. He didn't need them anymore. The tunnel spat me out on the far side of the river, behind an abandoned warehouse. I climbed the ladder, pushed the hatch open, and peeked out. Clear. Nate's block was only 5 minutes away. When I reached the laundromat, my chest was tight, not from running, but from fear. The front windows were smashed, and the door hung open. Inside, the machines were still spinning, laundry half finished, as if everyone had just walked out mid-cycle. I took the stairs 2 at a time and pounded on Nate's door. No answer. I kicked it in. The apartment was wrecked, drawers pulled out, fridge open, food gone. The couch was overturned, and there was a smear of blood across the wall near the kitchen. My stomach dropped. "Nate!" I shouted. My voice echoed, no reply. Then I saw it, his phone face down on the floor. I picked it up. The screen was cracked, but the last text was still there, sent at 2:14 a.m. "They're here. Can hear them in the hall. Don't come." The message cut off. I stood there for a long time, staring at the phone. My brother was gone. Whether the aliens had him or he was dead in some alley, I didn't know. But I did know one thing. If they'd taken him, there was a chance, just a chance, I could get him back. That's when I heard footsteps outside. I slipped behind the door just as it creaked open. A figure stepped in. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing torn fatigues. He had a rifle slung across his chest and a bandolier of ammo. His eyes swept the room before landing on me. "You're alive," he said flatly. "Good. You're coming with me." I didn't move. "Why?" "Because you've got that look," he said. "The look of someone who isn't bending the knee. We're putting together something. Resistance. And we need every bastard willing to put a bullet through those things." I glanced at his rifle, then back at him. "You really think you can win?" He smirked just a little. "Not today, not tomorrow. But we can make them bleed. And maybe, just maybe, make them sorry they ever set foot here." That word, sorry, hit me like a punch, because regret was exactly what I wanted them to feel. I followed him out into the burning city, not knowing that the next few days would turn me from a man just trying to survive into something the aliens would learn to fear. The man with the fatigues said his name was Briggs, not Sergeant Briggs or Lieutenant Briggs, just Briggs. He didn't waste time explaining his life story. He walked like a man who'd been giving orders for years, and his voice had the kind of weight that made you follow without thinking too hard about it. We stuck to the alleys, heading east toward the ruins of the old train yard. The streets were quieter now, almost eerily so. The harvesters had moved on, but that didn't mean we were safe. Every so often, Briggs would raise a fist, and we'd drop into cover, waiting until a patrol passed. The alien patrols weren't like the giant machines I'd seen before. These were smaller, maybe 8 feet tall, moving on 4 insect-like limbs with a strange rolling gait. They carried weapons like curved staffs, the tips glowing faintly blue. I saw one fire at a wall just to test it, and the bricks didn't just crumble. They vanished, leaving a smooth, smoking gap as if they'd never been there. We finally ducked through a hole in the fence into the train yard. Most of the old cars were rusted and half buried in weeds, but tucked near the center, hidden behind a stack of freight containers, was a scene I didn't expect to see. People. At least 20 of them, armed, dirty, and watching us like hawks. A woman with cropped black hair and a pistol at her side stepped forward. "Briggs, who's the stray?" Briggs glanced at me, Found him across the river. Knows how to keep his head down. Might know how to shoot. You know the rules. Useful stays. Dead weight gets sent packing." I didn't wait to be tested. I pulled the Glock from my belt, took the empty bottle someone tossed my way, and sent it spinning into the air. One shot. The glass exploded mid-flight. The woman didn't smile, but she lowered her weapon. "Name?" "Daniel." "All right, Daniel. Welcome to hell." They called themselves the Yard, and they were the closest thing to organized resistance I'd seen since the invasion began. Their base was a patchwork fortress made from shipping containers, train cars, and scrap metal, with a narrow entrance you could only reach by ducking between two rusted boxcars. Inside, they had water barrels, a makeshift armory, and a few tents. I even saw a radio set, though it looked like it had been cobbled together from 3 different decades of tech. Briggs gave me the quick tour, then led me to a corner where a map of the city had been laid out on a crate. Red X's marked alien landing zones, while blue circles marked resistance safe houses. There weren't many blue circles. "We're hitting one of their collectors tonight," Briggs said, tapping a spot near the industrial district. "They've been using it to store anyone they grab before shipping them off. We get in, we get people out, we blow the place to hell." "How many people?" I asked. "Not enough to call it an army," he said. "Enough to make noise." It wasn't a great plan, but it was a plan. And after finding Nate's apartment wrecked, I wasn't going to pass up a chance to hurt the bastards who took him. We prepped through the afternoon. I was given a battered M4 with 3 mags and a combat knife. The rest of the crew checked weapons, filled Molotovs, and stripped down explosives into smaller charges. The woman with cropped hair, her name was Vega, handled the bombs like she'd been born with them. As the sun dipped behind the smoke, we moved out. 9 of us in total, slipping through shadows toward the industrial district. The closer we got, the more alien tech we saw. Black spires driven into the ground, cables pulsing faint blue light between them. I didn't know what they were for, but I knew they weren't built for us. The collector was an ugly thing, half factory, half prison. It looked like the aliens had grown it rather than built it. The walls weren't steel. They were some kind of black, ridged material that shifted faintly, almost like breathing. Tall archways led inside, guarded by 4 patrol units. Briggs signaled, and we split into 2 teams. I went with him and Vega around the east side, where the wall had partially fused with the remains of a warehouse. We climbed the rubble, slipping through a jagged gap into the building. Inside was worse than I'd imagined. Rows of pods lined the floor, each one a translucent shell with a faint yellow glow. Inside, people floated in some kind of liquid, eyes closed, bodies slack. Some were still wearing street clothes, others stripped to undergarments. Tubes were connected to their necks and wrists, pulsing with that same faint blue light I'd seen in the cables outside. I searched the faces without meaning to. I don't know what I would have done if I'd seen Nate there. Part of me hoped I would, so I could drag him out, but another part knew what it would do to me to see him like that. Vega knelt by one of the pods, examining the tubing. "It's feeding something into them," she muttered. "Sedatives, maybe, or something worse." Briggs nodded toward the far end of the room. "Control units that way. We take it out. These things should open." We moved carefully, weaving between the pods. The air had a faint chemical bite to it, making my eyes water. Then, just as we reached the control console, a towering pillar covered in shifting alien glyphs. We heard the screech. It was high-pitched and metallic, echoing off the walls. I turned just in time to see 2 patrol units drop from the ceiling like spiders, their limbs slamming into the floor with bone-rattling force. "Down!" Briggs shouted. The first shot from my rifle tore through one's joint, snapping a leg backward. It screeched again, firing its staff weapon at the floor where we'd been standing a second earlier. The blast left a perfectly smooth crater, glowing faintly before fading. Vega was already working on the control unit, jamming charges into cracks in the black material. Briggs and I kept the patrols busy, him firing in short bursts, me switching to single shots to conserve ammo. One of them lunged, swinging a limb like a spear. I ducked under it and drove my knife into a gap between its plates. A gush of thick, black fluid sprayed out, coating my arm. The thing shrieked and staggered back, but it didn't stop fighting. "Done!" Vega yelled. She dove for cover just as the charges went off. The control unit didn't just explode. It ruptured. The glyphs flared white, then collapsed in on themselves like they'd been sucked into a void. The pods hissed, the liquid inside draining away. People began coughing, gasping, clawing at the tubes in their skin. Some could stand, others just lay there shivering. We didn't have time to help them all. Briggs grabbed the nearest guy and shoved him toward the exit. "Move! Anyone who can run, run! If you can't, crawl!" The surviving patrol unit let out another screech. But before it could attack, something huge slammed through the wall. It wasn't a patrol, it was a harvester, smaller than the ones in the city, but still towering over us, its limbs ending in vicious, barbed clamps. Its beam weapon began charging, the air around it shimmering gold. Briggs didn't hesitate. "Out the back! Now!" We ran. The harvester's beam sliced through the pods like they were nothing, taking several freed prisoners with it. The screams were short. We burst out into the alley behind the collector, the night lit orange from fires we hadn't set. Somewhere to the west, I heard more gunfire, probably the other half of the yard keeping guards busy. By the time we regrouped, we'd saved maybe a dozen people. Not many, but more than 0. Briggs looked at the survivors, then at the rest of us. "We hurt them tonight. They'll come harder now. And that's good, because next time, we're going to make them bleed." Standing there, breathing hard, I realized something. The aliens thought they were farmers, and we were cattle. But they'd just learned something about cattle. They kick when you try to put them in a pen. And some of us? We kick hard enough to break bone. And they weren't ready for that. We didn't get back to the yard until near dawn. The survivors we'd pulled out of the collector were shivering and silent, their eyes hollow. Some still had alien tubing marks along their necks and wrists. Vega and a few others moved them into one of the converted train cars we used as a med station. Briggs didn't say a word until the last of them was settled. Then he called a meeting. The yard didn't have a command tent or a polished briefing room. We gathered around a dented shipping container in the middle of the yard, with the map of the city spread out on top. The smell of diesel and smoke hung heavy in the air. "They hit us harder every time we make a move," Briggs said, voice low but sharp. "Last night wasn't a rescue, it was a warning shot. Now we hit back." "Hit them how?" Vega asked. "You saw the patrols. You saw the harvester. We're gnats to them." "Not if we take their stinger," Briggs replied. He pointed to one of the red X's on the map. "Here, this is a relay hub. Everything they coordinate, patrol routes, harvest schedules, even their comms, runs through these. The yard's been watching this one for a week. Light guard during the day, heavier at night, but still vulnerable. If we can take it intact." "You want to use it?" I cut in. Briggs looked straight at me. "Yeah. If we can figure out how their comms work, we can listen in. Maybe feed them false orders. Turn their precision into chaos." It was insane. It was risky. And it was the first plan I'd heard that wasn't just about surviving the day. By the time the meeting broke, my stomach was twisted in that strange mix of dread and adrenaline that only came before something suicidal. I didn't sleep. Spent most of the day cleaning my rifle, checking the sights, going over the route in my head. We moved at sundown. The team was smaller this time. Just me, Briggs, Vega, and a guy named Rorton who carried a heavy pack of tools and explosives. Rorton was wiry and quiet, the kind of man who looked like he'd been living in the shadows long before the invasion. The relay hub wasn't a building. It was a spire, 30 feet tall, black as oil, humming faintly. Strange veins of blue light ran along its surface, pulsing in slow, steady rhythm. It stood in the middle of a cleared lot, surrounded by alien structures that looked grown rather than built. 2 patrol units circled it, their movements unnervingly synchronized. "Timing's tight," Briggs whispered as we crouched behind a collapsed wall. "Patrols pass each other every 40 seconds. That's our window to cross." I watched the machines pace. The first time they crossed, I counted. The second time, I readied my rifle. On the third, we moved. The dirt crunched under my boots louder than I liked, but we made it to the base of the spire without drawing attention. Up close, the thing wasn't just humming, it was breathing. The surface rose and fell in slow waves, like some massive animal sleeping. "Creepy," Rorton muttered, as he dropped his pack and pulled out a set of tools that looked half mechanical, half homemade. Vega kept her eyes on the patrols. "You've got 2 minutes, Max." Rorton didn't answer. He found a seam in the surface and jammed a small metal wedge into it. The spire shuddered faintly, and a panel slid back to reveal a cluster of pulsating blue cables. They didn't look like wires. They looked alive, twitching faintly as if aware of our presence. "That's new," I said. "Everything they've got is new," Rorton replied. "Keep 'em off me." While he worked, I scanned the lot. The patrols passed again, and for a moment I thought we might actually pull it off clean. Then one of them stopped. It tilted its head, or whatever counted as its head, toward us, plates shifting. The blue glow along its staff brightened. "Briggs," I said. "Rorton, wrap it up," Briggs barked. 30 seconds. We didn't have 30 seconds. The patrol let out a high, metallic wail, and the other one immediately turned toward us. I raised my rifle and fired. The first shot took the lead patrol in the joint, the second in the head. Black fluid sprayed, but it kept moving. Vega opened up with her SMG, shredding its torso until it collapsed in a heap of metal and limbs. The second patrol was faster. It lunged, staff slamming into the dirt where I'd been standing a moment earlier. The ground hissed and vanished in a perfect hole. I rolled, came up on one knee, and fired into the gap between its plates. It screamed, an awful, static-filled sound, and staggered back. Briggs was on it instantly, driving a combat knife into what passed for its throat. It convulsed once, then went still. "Got it!" Rorton shouted. The cables were now connected to a small, jury-rigged device he'd pulled from his pack. The spire's blue veins flickered erratically, as though it were trying to shake us off. "Move!" Briggs ordered. We didn't need telling twice. We grabbed Rorton and his gear and sprinted for cover as the spire let out a deep, resonant pulse that made my teeth ache. The sound echoed through the lot and into the night. By the time we got back to the yard, the relay device was already being tested. Rorton connected it to the scavenged radio set, twisting dials until a burst of static came through, followed by the unmistakable screech of alien speech. None of us understood it, but it didn't matter. We could hear them now. Over the next 2 days, we learned more than I thought possible. The aliens didn't just talk. They coordinated in precise, coded sequences. We couldn't translate their words, but we could recognize patterns. When patrols were being rerouted, when harvesters were moving, when they were calling for reinforcements. We started feeding false signals, not enough to alert them. Just little changes. A patrol sent the wrong way. A harvester told to move early. A supply drop delayed. It worked better than I dared hope. The once perfect rhythm of their occupation started to falter. We even intercepted an alien distress call. Urgent, panicked. It was the first time I'd heard fear in their voices. That fear made me hungrier for more. One night, as I sat by the radio with Rawdon, we picked up something unusual. A series of short bursts, faster and sharper than anything we'd heard before. Rawdon's eyes narrowed. "That's not patrol chatter," he said. "That's a command recall. Something big just got pulled back." "What?" I asked. He fiddled with the dials. "We just forced them to redeploy something they didn't want to move. And if they're that desperate, we can hit them where it hurts." I didn't even have to think about it. "Then we do it." Briggs agreed. The next target was an alien supply crawler, one of the massive multi-legged machines that ferried resources between the spires and the harvest ships. It would be heavily guarded, but if we could destroy one, the loss would echo through their whole operation. The mission was set for the next night. I spent the hours before it thinking of Nate, not of finding him, but of the possibility that every blow we struck brought him closer to freedom, or at least closer to vengeance if it was already too late. We moved under a moonless sky, using the alien chatter to track the crawler's path. When it finally came into view, my breath caught. It was bigger than a city bus, its segmented body bristling with storage pods. Each step made the ground tremble. We hit it fast, Molotovs first, then rifle fire aimed at the joints. The crawler shrieked, its pods igniting one by one. Alien guards poured out, firing wildly, but they were sloppy. Without clear orders, thanks to the false signals, we cut them down. When the crawler finally collapsed in on itself, flames chewing through its black armor, I saw Briggs grin for the first time. "That," he said over the crackle of burning alien metal, "is going to keep them up at night." And for the first time since the invasion began, I believed him. The crawler attack didn't just get their attention, it painted a target the size of the damn city on our backs. For the first day after, we didn't hear a peep from the alien comms, except for garbled bursts, like they were trying to encrypt faster than we could listen. Rawdon called it the sound of them choking on their own coordination. And for a brief moment, it almost felt like we'd bought ourselves some breathing room. That illusion lasted until nightfall. I was on watch duty at the yard's northern perimeter when the ground started to hum, not the deep, lazy vibration of the harvesters, but a sharp, rapid thrum that rattled my teeth. The air went still, heavy, my gut clenched. Then I saw them. Not patrol units, not harvesters. These things were leaner, sharper, almost skeletal in design. They moved on 6 limbs, each joint bending in ways that made my stomach twist just to watch. Their bodies were armored in overlapping plates that reflected the dim light like wet obsidian. And unlike the other machines, these didn't stalk or lumber. They ran. I hit the alarm before they even crossed the first line of rusted train cars. The yard erupted into motion, men and women grabbing rifles, Vega hauling crates of ammo into cover positions, Briggs barking orders like we'd trained for this our whole lives. "Hold the choke points," he shouted. "Don't let them swarm us." The first wave hit like a storm. They didn't hesitate, didn't scan, didn't pause. They leapt over barricades, slicing through steel with those bladed limbs like it was paper. I dropped one with 3 quick shots to the joints, but 2 more took its place. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't need to. These things were built to kill up close. One of them landed on a shipping container beside me, its bladed leg stabbing down. I rolled aside, the metal screeching as it pierced through where my chest had been a second earlier. I jammed my rifle into the gap under its armor and emptied the mag. It convulsed, black fluid spraying, and toppled off the container. "Fall back," Briggs called, and we pulled toward the central barricade. a reinforced wall of welded steel plates that was supposed to be our last line of defense. The air filled with screams and gunfire. I saw one of the yard fighters, kid couldn't have been more than 19, get caught mid-run. The creature's bladed limb swept across his torso, and he folded in half before hitting the ground. They were fast, but not invincible. Vega's Molotovs slowed them, forcing them to leap back or burn. Rorden's claymores shredded a cluster that tried to flank us from the west side, but everyone we dropped seemed to be replaced by 2 more. "This isn't a raid," I yelled to Briggs between bursts of fire. "They're here to wipe us out." "Then we make them regret trying," he growled. That line stuck in my head even as the fight got worse. By the second hour, the yard was half in flames. Our ammo was running low, and the creatures were adapting, leaping over fire, avoiding traps. I caught sight of one climbing the side of the crane tower, moving with insect precision. Before I could line up a shot, it launched itself into the central barricade, carving through steel like butter. The gap it made was all the others needed. "Inside! Fall back inside!" Briggs ordered, and we pulled toward the med station. The survivors we'd rescued from the collector were huddled inside, eyes wide, clutching anything that could be used as a weapon. That's when the comms set, still hooked into the relay device, lit up with alien chatter. Rorden's face went pale. "They're calling in an aerial strike." "How long?" Briggs demanded. Rorden listened, then said one word. "Minutes." If they hit the yard from above, there'd be nothing left but scorched earth and ash. Briggs made the call without hesitation. "We split. Scatter in groups of 2 or 3. They can't hit us all if we're spread." It was chaos. People grabbing whatever ammo they could, kicking down rear exits, vanishing into the smoke. I stuck with Briggs. Vega went with Rorden. We didn't say goodbye. There wasn't time. We bolted through a narrow gap between burning train cars, the heat licking our faces. The sound behind us was worse than the fight. A low, building roar that made my bones feel like they'd shake apart. We hit the open street just as the strike landed. The sky lit up gold, the same shimmering energy the harvesters used, but amplified until it turned night into false daylight. The yard didn't explode. It evaporated. Everything inside that perimeter simply ceased to exist. I stood there, staring at the empty, smoking space where our home had been, my throat tight. Briggs put a hand on my shoulder. Not comfort, just pressure. "Don't look," he said. "We're not done." We moved. For the next 2 days, we lived like ghosts. The yard was gone, our people scattered or dead. We slept in basements, abandoned offices, anywhere we could lock a door and post a guard. Briggs kept the radio close, intercepting what chatter we could. The aliens were pleased with themselves. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Arrogance, finality. They thought they'd broken us. They hadn't. On the 3rd night, Rorden's voice crackled through the comms. "Briggs! Daniel, you alive?" I grabbed the handset. "Barely." "Good. We've got something. Big. Meet us at Grid 6, old commuter tunnel. Bring whatever you've got left." We found them in the dark belly of the tunnel. Vega, Rorden, and 4 others from the yard. Dirty, exhausted, but breathing. And between them sat something I never expected to see up close. Alien tech, stripped from one of their machines and rewired with human cables and power cells. Vega grinned, though it didn't reach her eyes. "We've been busy." It was a weapon. A cannon, maybe, mounted on a crude tripod. It still hummed with that alien blue energy, but the trigger assembly was unmistakably human. Scrap metal and duct tape holding it together. "Does it work?" I asked. Rorden smirked. "It better, because we're going to field test it tomorrow night." The target was one of the smaller harvest ships, still massive compared to anything we had, but vulnerable if you hit it in the right place. The yard's loss had hurt, but if we could bring down a ship, it wouldn't just be revenge, it would be a message. We spent the rest of the night hauling the weapon through the tunnels, emerging only when the streets were dead quiet. Every step, I felt the weight of what we were carrying, not just the cannon, but the fight itself. Briggs laid it out for us before dawn. This is our turn. They came for slaves. They think we're broken. We show them we're not. We show them we bite. I didn't need convincing. The next night, as we set up the cannon on a rooftop overlooking the landing zone, I thought about Nate. If he was alive, maybe he'd see this. If he was dead, maybe it'd be the first step in making them pay for him. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder. The alien comms crackled with landing instructions. Riordan sighted the cannon. Vega fed the charge. Briggs gave the order. I flipped the trigger. The weapon's recoil was like being hit in the chest by a truck. The blue bolt tore across the night sky, striking the ship dead center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the hull ruptured, spilling fire and debris as the engines screamed. The ship didn't crash. It fell, slamming into the streets with a roar that shook the buildings around us. For the first time, we'd put one of their ships in the dirt. And somewhere in their cold, alien minds, the first seeds of real regret had just taken root. The alien ship burned for hours. From our rooftop position, we could see the wreck like a fallen god, half buried in asphalt, one wing twisted into a skeletal frame, the hull split wide enough to spill out smoke and fire into the night. The smell was awful, a mix of scorched metal and something organic that turned my stomach. Whatever they used inside those ships, it wasn't just machinery. We didn't cheer. Not because it wasn't a victory, God it was, but because every one of us knew what would come next. The aliens wouldn't ignore this. They'd respond fast and hard. "Pack it," Briggs ordered, already folding up the cannon's tripod. Riordan disconnected the cables and dumped the spent core into a thick metal case. We left the roof as quietly as we'd arrived, slipping back into the service tunnels before the first alien drones arrived. We traveled deep, past the old commuter tunnel where Vega had set up shop, through a series of collapsed subway lines that smelled like mold and rust. Briggs called it getting below their eyes. The aliens scanned from above, and most of their patrols stuck to the surface. By the time we stopped, it was well past dawn. We set up in a half-flooded maintenance room, using overturned lockers and broken workbenches as makeshift walls. No one slept. We listened. The alien comms were chaos. Even without a translation, we could hear the urgency in their voices. Rapid bursts, overlapping signals, commands layered over commands. Riordan grinned like a man listening to an enemy choke. "They're fighting themselves," he said. "Multiple commanders talking over each other. Somebody's in trouble for losing that ship." "They'll get their orders straight soon enough," Briggs said, his tone cold. "And when they do, they'll come hunting." He was right. By noon, their tone had shifted. No more panic, just precision. The chatter turned clean, sharp. Patrol routes tightened. Reports of heat blooms on the surface increased, probably their version of detecting human movement. Then came the sound none of us wanted to hear. A deep, slow pulse. Not the hum of harvesters, not the sharp thrum of their strike units. This was heavier, like the heartbeat of something enormous. Vega froze mid-motion. "That's new." Riordan's brow furrowed. "Not new, just rare. That's a hunter-killer platform." "What's that?" I asked. He looked at me like a man about to tell you a ghost story was real. "It's what they send when they stop trying to capture you." That night we saw it. It wasn't a ship in the way the harvesters were. It moved low, almost skimming the rooftops, its surface rippling like black water. Dozens of tendrils hung beneath it, each tipped with something that looked like a weapon or a sensor. The platform didn't patrol, it prowled, slowly, deliberately, and it was searching for us. We went deeper underground, rationing food, speaking in whispers. Even then, the platform seemed to know we were close. Its pulse grew louder every night, sometimes rattling dust from the tunnel ceiling. On the third night, it found our hideout. The first sign was the water. We'd been camped in the maintenance room when the half-flooded floor began to ripple, not from our movement, but from something above. A faint shimmer passed across the ceiling, like light through oil. "Move," Briggs said immediately. We scrambled into the adjoining tunnel just as the ceiling above our hideout collapsed in a shower of concrete and steel. One of the tendrils dropped through, the tip glowing blue. It fired, and the entire room vanished in a blinding flash. Walls, floor, everything gone. We ran through the dark, boots splashing through water, the platform's tendrils snaking into the tunnel behind us. One fired, the beam carving a hole in the wall inches from my head. The air stank of ozone and dust. Vega tossed a grenade back down the tunnel. The blast didn't stop the tendrils, but it slowed them long enough for us to duck into an old utility shaft. We climbed until my arms burned, emerging in a street-level access hatch. The city above was worse than I remembered. Fires still burned from the yard strike. Alien patrols moved in tight formations, scanning every shadow. Drones buzzed overhead like metallic hornets. "We can't stay here," Rorden said. "We're not staying," Briggs replied. "We're moving toward their teeth." I stared at him. "That's suicide." "That's war," he said simply. The target wasn't another ship or crawler. It was a supply nexus, one of the massive, tower-like structures where they processed whatever they were taking from us and shipping it off-world. We'd been close enough to see one once. A black spire riddled with openings, guarded by dozens of patrol units. Hitting it now, when they were already hunting us, was madness. But that's exactly why Briggs wanted to do it. "They'll expect us to hide," he said. "So we hit them instead. Show them that killing the yard didn't scare us off. It just made us meaner." We moved at night, sticking to alleys, keeping low when drones passed. The closer we got to the spire, the thicker the patrols became. By the time we reached the outer perimeter, my nerves were shot. Vega and Rorden set the charges on the eastern side, while Briggs and I drew the patrols toward the west with sniper fire. It worked for about 2 minutes. Then the platform arrived. It dropped in from above, silent this time, tendrils already sweeping for targets. One slammed into the pavement beside me, the impact sending me sprawling. Briggs grabbed my collar and yanked me back as the beam fired, vaporizing the spot I'd just been. "Go," he shouted, shoving me towards the eastern perimeter. I didn't argue. We sprinted for the charges, the platform tearing up the ground behind us. Vega was still arming the last one when we got there. 30 seconds, she yelled. The platform's tendrils lashed forward. Briggs opened fire with everything he had, drawing its attention. I saw one of the tendrils stab toward him like a spear, and I moved without thinking, slamming into him hard enough to knock us both aside. The tendril missed him by inches. It didn't miss me. The beam didn't hit full on, just grazed my left arm, but it felt like my flesh had been erased and replaced with raw electricity. I went down, vision blurring, ears ringing. The last thing I remember before the blast was Vega's voice, distant and urgent. "Fire in the hole!" When I came to, the spire was gone, just a jagged crater where it had stood. The platform was nowhere in sight, either destroyed in the blast or pulled back to lick its wounds. Briggs was crouched over me, face grim. "You're lucky," he said. "That beam should have taken the whole arm." I looked down. My arm was there, but the skin where the beam hit was blackened and cracked like burnt porcelain. I could still move my fingers, but the pain was a living thing, crawling under my skin. "We hurt them again," Vega said quietly, standing over the wreckage, "and they'll hate us for it." Good, I thought, because hate was just another kind of regret. And I wanted them drowning in it before we were done. The destruction of the spire didn't just slow them down, it forced them to change. Up until that point, the aliens had been fighting us like we were pests. Dangerous, yes, but still manageable. After the spire fell, they started treating us like a legitimate threat. And when an enemy decides you're worth their full attention, that's when the real war begins. We saw it the next night. The hunter-killer platform that had nearly ended us at the spire? That wasn't their main weapon. That was just a scout compared to what they brought in now. It came from the clouds without warning. A living fortress. I don't have another way to describe it. 4 massive limbs, each the size of a building, slammed into the ground hard enough to shatter streets. The body hung above like a floating citadel, bristling with weapons that hummed with lethal energy. The sound it made was like a constant grinding roar, as if the air itself hated it being here. Rawdon, who'd been in the military before everything fell apart, just muttered one word. Siege engine. This thing didn't hunt. It didn't chase. It simply advanced, leveling everything between it and whatever target it had been given. And from the alien chatter we intercepted, that target was every remaining human stronghold in the city. "We can't fight that," Vega said flatly. "No," Briggs agreed. "Not head on." We moved fast, staying ahead of it as it crushed neighborhoods into rubble. The refugees who'd survived the yard strike were scattered throughout the ruins, and now we were racing to pull them out before the siege engine reached them. The alien patrols were thicker than ever, moving in tight coordination with the behemoth. For 2 days, we played a deadly game of cat and mouse, snatching survivors from collapsed buildings, blowing up patrols that got too close, and falling back before the engine's weapons could zero in. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much. The pain in my arm never let up, the burnt skin itching and throbbing like it was trying to crawl off my bones. But I kept moving. By the 3rd night, the behemoth had done more than destroy streets. It had reshaped them. The ground behind it was littered with strange black growths, like jagged coral made of metal. Rawdon guessed they were some kind of alien infrastructure, maybe a way to spread their control faster. Whatever it was, it meant they didn't plan on leaving. We couldn't just run forever. Briggs knew it. I knew it. Everyone who'd been in the fight long enough knew it. That's when Rawdon came to us with the plan. "We've been looking at it wrong," he said, jabbing a finger at the crude sketch of the siege engine he'd drawn in charcoal. "We keep thinking we need to blow it up. We don't. We need to blind it." He pointed to a cluster of glowing structures under the floating body. "That's not armor. That's sensory. They use those to scan and target. Knock those out, and it's not a siege engine anymore. It's a blind, slow target." "Then what?" Vega asked. "Then we leave it," he said. "Let it stumble around until it walks into its own patrols. Let it be a liability instead of a weapon." It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only one that didn't end with all of us flattened under a walking city. The problem was getting close enough. The sensory nodes hung low, but not low enough to reach from the ground. We'd have to get onto one of the engine's legs and climb while it was moving, avoiding its weapons and the patrols around it. "Insane," Vega said. "Absolutely," Briggs replied. "When do we start?" We set out at dusk, shadowing the siege engine from the ruins of a collapsed office building. Its legs moved in a slow but relentless rhythm, each step shaking dust from the walls around us. The patrols were spread in a wide circle, scanning every shadow. Our approach was simple. Blow a hole in the patrol line, slip through while they investigated, and hit the engine before they realized what we were really after. When the moment came, Vega and Riordan planted charges under a collapsed overpass. The explosion tore through 2 patrol units instantly, drawing the others toward the smoke. Briggs and I ran low, keeping to the rubble until we reached the shadow of one of the massive legs. Up close, it was like standing next to a skyscraper that could move. The surface was ridged, almost like muscle under armor, and it radiated a deep, steady vibration that traveled through my bones. "Climb fast," Briggs said. "If it shakes, hold on, or you're dead." The climb was brutal. My injured arm screamed with every pull, and the ridges were slick in places with that black, oily fluid the aliens bled. Halfway up, the leg shifted, and I nearly lost my grip. Briggs caught my harness and hauled me back against the surface. When we reached the underside of the body, the sensory nodes glowed like clusters of blue glass. They pulsed in a slow rhythm, each beat sending a faint shiver through the metal. "Plant them all," Briggs said, passing me the charges. We worked fast, setting explosives on each cluster. I was on the last one when the alien chatter in my earpiece spiked. Rapid, urgent bursts. "They know," I said. "Then we're out of time," Briggs replied. We climbed down the opposite leg, dropping the last 10 feet to the rubble below. Vega was already on comms, counting down from 10. When the charges went off, it was like watching a giant go blind. The blue glow of the nodes flared, then went dark. The engine slowed, its movements jerky, uncertain. One of its legs slammed into a patrol unit, crushing it flat. Another swiped across a row of alien structures, leveling them. The alien chatter was a mess again, voices talking over each other, commands getting lost. Riordan laughed over the comms, a short, sharp bark of satisfaction. We didn't stick around to watch. The moment the engine went blind, the patrols would be hunting for whoever did it, and we were still too close. For the next 2 days, the siege engine staggered through the city, colliding with buildings and smashing its own forces. We heard from other resistance cells, yes, there were more of us, that the chaos gave them a chance to hit alien positions they'd never been able to reach before. For the first time since the invasion began, we weren't just surviving. We were on the offensive. But victories like that don't last. On the morning of the 3rd day, the alien chatter went silent. Completely silent. It was worse than hearing them talk because it meant they were planning something big, and they didn't want us listening. Briggs called it before anyone else. "They're pulling back to regroup. That's not a retreat. That's the breath before they hit harder." When they came back, we were ready. Or at least we thought we were. The first sign was the sky. It didn't tear open like the day they arrived. It folded. The clouds twisted into a spiraling vortex, and from it descended ships we hadn't seen before. Sleeker than the harvesters, bristling with weapons, each one flanked by swarms of drones. "They're not here to take prisoners anymore," Vega said quietly. And she was right. The aliens had decided they'd had enough of trying to break us piece by piece. Now they were coming to wipe us off the face of the earth. Briggs just checked his rifle and looked at me. "This is the part where we stop running." I didn't argue. Not because I was ready to die, but because I could see it in all their faces. We'd pushed the invaders far enough that they'd abandoned subtlety. That meant they were angry. And anger made people, alien or human, make mistakes. Mistakes we could kill them for. The day the final assault began, the city didn't feel like Earth anymore. The sky was a spinning wound, lit from within by alien lightning. Their new warships hovered in formation above us, each flanked by swarms of drones that moved with perfect precision. The hum in the air wasn't just sound. It was pressure, crawling under your skin and making your teeth ache. Below, the ground forces moved in sync with the ships overhead. Patrol units, hunter-killers, and those bladed strike beasts from the yard attack poured into the streets in one endless tide. They weren't scanning, weren't hunting. They were marching with one intent: annihilation. Briggs stood beside me on the rooftop where we'd taken position, his rifle resting across the parapet. "This is it," he said flatly. "We're either ghosts tomorrow or legends." I didn't feel like a legend. My arm still ached from the spire fight, the skin mottled black and silver from the beam's burn. I was tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep, tired in my bones. But as I looked out over the alien war machine closing in, I knew running wasn't an option anymore. We weren't alone. Word of the siege engine's blinding had spread, and other resistance cells had crawled out of hiding to join us, maybe 60 fighters in all, ragged, underfed, armed with scavenged weapons and alien tech we barely understood. But every one of them was ready to die here. Riordan was crouched over the cannon we'd stolen and modified, running power checks. Vega had a satchel of explosives slung across her shoulder, her eyes sharp and cold. There was no nervous chatter, no speeches, just the quiet focus of people who'd made their peace with what was coming. The plan was insane, which meant it had a chance. We couldn't beat their numbers, but we could gut their command. Riordan had been studying the alien chatter since the silence broke, and he'd picked out one consistent signal. Something he believed was a fleet coordination node aboard the largest warship. Knock that out, and their entire formation would falter. Even for a few minutes, that would give us time to rip them apart. The catch? The node was on the underside of the ship, behind layers of armor and guarded by enough drones to blot out the sun. We didn't have the firepower to punch through, but we did have a weakness. When the node transmitted, it vented a thin stream of energy through a small, iris-like port. Riordan believed if we could feed a destabilized alien power cell into that vent while it was open, the resulting chain reaction would blow the node and possibly cripple the entire ship. Which meant someone had to get under the ship, in the middle of the killing field, at the exact moment the port opened. I didn't volunteer. Briggs didn't ask. But when his eyes met mine, we both knew it was going to be me. The battle began at sunrise. The first wave of drones screamed overhead, cutting down entire rows of our makeshift barricades with their energy cannons. We answered with everything we had. Rifle fire, Molotovs, the modified cannon ripping blue streaks through the air. The recoil knocked Riordan back with every shot, but he kept firing, his grin tight and furious. Alien ground forces surged into the streets. I dropped 2 of the bladed beasts with rifle shots to the joints, then ducked behind a collapsed wall as one of their staff weapons turned the concrete beside me into a glowing crater. Vega moved like smoke, darting between cover to plant explosives. Every blast tore holes in their formation, forcing the patrol units to divert. For every alien we killed, 3 more pushed forward. Overhead, the warship loomed like a mountain of metal and shadow. The underside was studded with weapons and strange, organic growths, but I could see the vent, small, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. "Port in 90 seconds, Riordan's voice crackled in my earpiece. I moved. The streets between me and the ship's shadow were a furnace. Burning wreckage, screaming fighters, alien beams slicing the air. I ran low, firing only when something got too close. Twice I had to roll behind cover as drones strafed the street, the heat of their weapons licking my back. I hit the base of a collapsed overpass and climbed, my boots slipping on loose concrete. From the top, I could see the vent clearly now, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the ship's deep, thrumming heartbeat. 60 seconds, Riordan said. The modified power cell hung heavy in my vest, warm against my chest. If it ruptured early, I'd vanish faster than the yard had. I jumped from the overpass to a jagged fragment of building that jutted into the ship's shadow. The port was above me now, starting to iris open. 30 seconds. That's when the drone swarm spotted me. They came down in a spiral, weapons hot. I dove behind the building fragment as the first blasts tore chunks from it, heat washing over me. I returned fire, but every shot I took slowed me down. The port was almost fully open now. 15. I broke cover and sprinted, climbing the last few meters of twisted metal until I was directly under the vent. The hum of the ship's systems was so loud here, it made my vision blur. 10. 9. A bladed beast burst through the rubble beside me, its limb arcing down toward my head. Instinct took over. I swung the power cell like a club, slamming it into the joint. The impact made it screech, stumbling back just enough for me to shove the cell into the vent. 5. I let go and dropped, hitting the rubble hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. Above me, the port snapped shut. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the world turned white. The shockwave lifted me off my feet and threw me across the street. My ears rang, my skin burned, and the air was thick with dust and smoke. When I blinked my eyes open, the warship was listing hard to one side, its underside vomiting fire and debris. The drones spiraled out of formation, crashing into buildings or smashing into the streets. The alien ground forces froze, just for a moment, but that was all we needed. Briggs roared the order, and every fighter we had surged forward. We hit them with everything: explosives, cannon fire, raw rage. The once perfect precision of their advance collapsed into chaos. The warship didn't explode in the air. It fell, slamming into the far side of the city with a sound like the earth itself had cracked. The blast wave knocked me down again, but when I looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen since the day they arrived. They were retreating. Not in an orderly fallback. This was panic. Drones fleeing without formation, ground units breaking into a sprint, even the smaller warships pulling back toward the vortex in the clouds. And then they were gone. The vortex sealed as suddenly as it had opened, leaving nothing but the ruined sky and the smoking remains of their war machine. We didn't cheer. Not at first. We just stood there in the broken streets, catching our breath, listening to the silence where the alien hum had been. The absence of that sound was almost louder than the battle had been. It took hours to find out how many of us were left. Less than half. Briggs had a bullet graze across his ribs, Vega had burns down her side, and Riordan didn't make it. He'd stayed on the cannon until the end, holding the drones off me, and when they finally hit him, they hit hard. We buried him in the rubble of the yard, the closest thing we had to home. No speeches, no markers, just a promise that what he'd done would be remembered. As the days passed, we began to see signs. No more alien patrols, no signals on the comms, no hum in the night. The invaders hadn't just left. They weren't coming back. Briggs said it best. They came for slaves. They left with nothing but a warning. I still think about Nate. I don't know if he was on one of the ships we destroyed, or if he was taken somewhere I'll never reach, but I know one thing. If he could see what we did, he'd know they'll never try this here again. Because Earth wasn't the easy harvest they thought it would be. It was the place they learned fear, and we were the ones who taught it to them.